Z-patriot Igor Strelkov Girkin, who stood at the origins of Russian aggression against Ukraine, made a bold statement. He suspected that the Kremlin was preparing to capitulate in the war and called for the overthrow of the government in Russia. The letter, which Strelkov wrote in a Russian prison, was published by his associates. In his letter, Strelkov essentially stated the failure of the so-called SVO, noting that the format has exhausted itself and is leading Russia to defeat in the war. Strelkov noted that the Kremlin has already made concessions, abandoning its claims to parts of the Kherson and Zaporizhia regions controlled by the Ukrainian Armed Forces. According to him, this is the result of the inability of the Russian armed forces to achieve significant results on the battlefield. He suspects that the Russian authorities will also make compromises with the Donetsk region. According to the Z-patriot, Moscow is now faced with a choice: either prepare for capitulation or transform the war into a total one. And Putin's regime, he is sure, is incapable of the latter scenario. Strelkov actually called for the overthrow of the Russian dictator and his entire system, which has failed the SVO. Without a personnel revolution from above, we will never be able to win this war, simply because an aspen tree doesn't bear oranges, and those modest geniuses who managed to lose in the most seemingly advantageous situation in 3.5 years will never do anything useful in even more difficult conditions. Without large-scale personnel changes in the highest state apparatus, we will not only fail to withstand the challenges of the times, we will be crushed and devoured. Strelkov wrote. He also suspected that the Russian elite consisted of enemy agents seeking to destroy Russia. Judging by the latter, disappointment in the Z community is rapidly growing as the war continues. Putin's inability to secure victory in the war is directly reflected in his ratings. Earlier, Strelkov called Putin a loser and predicted his imminent failure because of Ukraine. We will have to either capitulate or change the format of the war, the Russian security officer wrote. However, he considers the chances of the second option to be negligible. According to Girkin, Moscow's hopes for negotiations with the help of US President Donald Trump have finally failed. My confidence in the complete failure of the peacekeeping process has become rock solid, the security officer noted. Strelkov noted that the Russian government has changed its rhetoric. The terms denazification, demilitarization, and statements about the alleged illegitimacy of the Ukrainian authorities have disappeared from public speeches. Instead, according to him, the Kremlin complains about the intransigence of Ukraine, which does not want to make peace with the Russian Federation and give up its territories to it. He stressed that Russia and its army were unable to impose even a compromise on Ukraine. We were unable to force Ukraine to even compromise with us. And look how much noise there was over the last 3.5 years. And Iskanders laughed, and they called us Country 404. And at the end, we complain about intractability of partners. We are begging Ukraine for at least some concessions. Well, we won't be able to beg for anything, not even at all. Strelkov complained.
A Russian air attack on northern Ukraine killed 2 people from the Danish Refugee Council who were clearing mines in an area previously occupied by Moscow's forces, Chernihiv Regional Governor Vyacheslav Cha said. The strike hit near the outskirts of the regional capital of Chernihiv, 125 kilometers north of Kiev. Experts say Ukraine is the most heavily mined country in the world, with teams of deminers across the north, south and east, where Ukraine retook land captured by Russia at the start of its full-scale invasion in 2022. The Russians deliberately targeted workers from the Danish Refugee Council's humanitarian demining mission. 2 people are known to have been killed, Cha said on social media. First, the Russians littered the area with explosives and mines. Now they are killing people, civilians who are risking their lives to clear our land, Cha added. 3 more people were wounded in the attack, he said. Russian forces surrounded the city at the start of the war, having invaded from Moscow ally Belarus, 50 kilometers away. This attack represents yet another grave violation committed by the Russian Federation. Targeting individuals engaged in demoning activities constitutes a deliberate attempt to obstruct efforts aimed at protecting civilians and ensuring the safety of communities, said Ukrainian Parliament Commissioner for Human Rights Dmytro Lubinets. The Russian Defense Ministry said Russian forces had struck a drone launch site in the Chernihiv region. Venezuela's government inaugurated a monument celebrating China as it marked 80 years since the end of the World War II on Wednesday. According to Associated Press, President Nicolas Maduro led the event and stated that, despite attacks from the United States, Venezuela remains standing, united, and willing to fight for peace and sovereignty in the country. Today, imperialism is launching a new attack. It is not the first nor will it be the last, just another attack, Maduro said without directly mentioning the United States and the strike on boat. The deadly U.S. military attack on a boat accused of carrying drugs in the Caribbean this week is the latest in a series of extraordinary measures that President Donald Trump has taken to combat the threat it sees from the Tren de Aragua gang. The White House has offered few details on Tuesday's attack and insists the 11 people aboard were members of the gang. U.S. officials have yet to explain how the military determined that those aboard the vessel were Tren de Aragua members. The strike represents a paradigm shift in how the U.S. is willing to combat drug trafficking in the Western Hemisphere.
Presidente constitucional de la República Bolivariana de Venezuela, comandante en jefe de la Fuerza Armada Nacional Bolivariana.
Atención, firme.